Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my live streams. This is Comics Today. This is a show that we do every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, unless I mess up the time and tell you we're starting at 7:30 when I really mean 7. But whatever, shout out to Tina for catching the error earlier. But we do this show every single week consistently on Wednesday to celebrate the best day of the week, that being New Comic Book Day. And we are going to dig into, I think, a pretty interesting topic that in some ways piggybacks off of the conversation that we had last week about a comic book crash. And we are going to endeavor to not repeat what we said last week. We will encourage you to go back and watch that video if you happen to miss it. But this week, we are going to talk about some other things, talk a little bit about maybe the double-edged sword that has been the pandemic, because in many ways, the pandemic has been good, if you will, and bad. And this is not to say anything about the loss of life, the loss of jobs, and all of that other stuff. But as far as comic book collecting, there is a little bit of a double-edged sword. And so we are going to dig into some of that with my guest a little bit later. But before we get to that topic, I have a couple of announcements to make. First and foremost, if you are watching this and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel for some reason or another, I want to officially invite you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you can stay abreast of all the content that I release from the channel on a weekly basis. It also makes you eligible for the giveaway that we do every single week of a comic book slab valued somewhere between $150 and $200. We give that slab away every single week right here on the channel, simply for watching the videos that come out from the channel. To that point, though, the book that we were supposed to give away on Sunday still has not been claimed. It is Wednesday. It has not been claimed. Come Sunday, this book actually goes to the second place. If you think that you won this book, you might want to watch Sunday's show so that you can claim your book in a timely fashion before it goes to the second person. Second person, do not send me an email just yet claiming the book. Do that on Sunday. Do that on Sunday and the book is yours. So that was the biggest announcement that I wanted to hip you guys to. There is a chance that we may not do a Comics Today show next Wednesday. We will see how things unfold. I will try to let you guys know in advance. And if I do not do a show next week, I will endeavor to give you a replacement video at the regularly scheduled time that videos are released, which is 3 p.m. Pacific time. All right. With that said, we are going to get to how we do our introductions or our greetings on this particular show on Wednesday. We do it by going to the chat and asking folks that are in the chat to shout out the books that they picked up if they hit an LCS today. And if there is something that you may have read today that we should put on the top of our stack, give us a shout out for that as well, because I personally have not picked up my books, and I would I'm looking forward to seeing some recommendations if indeed there are. My man Jerry, right on the top, Jerry says he picked up Teen Titans Academy, Aliens, Carnage, Black and White, the Berserker, the foil edition, Batman Black and White. He said, I've only read Berserker, but I liked it. I'll definitely be getting issue number 2. Issue number 1 was solid. Issue number 1 was solid. I enjoyed it. They came out with the new foil today, which was supposed to, I think, be released last week, but wasn't, or maybe the week before. I can't recall. It's a little bit delayed, but it is out, and there was a little bit of a surprise in that issue. If you haven't seen it, you definitely want to crack it open and look to see what's inside. Let me look to see what else folks are talking about here. Scrolling through the comments, a lot of folks in here, scrolling. You guys were having a little bit of back and forth there. Let me see what else you guys are talking about. People pointed out that my time was incorrect. Alan did not get a chance to hit up his LCS. All good. Steve White says, I really enjoyed Carnage, Black and White, and Blood. Even picked up all the variants. The cover for that was pretty solid. I'm curious whether people think that cover for, I think it's Carnage, Black and White, Gleason, is Is that his name? Whether that is going to be as popular as ASM 55 has been, which has shown up on the top 10 most submitted books in the CGC as of late. So I'm just curious whether people think that that next cover is going to be as popular. My man Matt Woods picked up Savage Avengers. He also picked up Batman and Superman. There you go. Dave is talking about he wanted to pick up Batman Superman 16. Both heroes appear in their original costumes. Action Comics 1 and Detective Comics 27. Finally. scrolling through the other comments, seeing here if folks are talking about the books that they picked up just yet. I don't really see. This week was very robust, says my man L. Smith. Says 3 full comics to go boxes. If you don't know what those are, they're right there. Comics to go boxes. Too many to name, but I did get Alien 1 and the Shiny Foil Berserker. I am looking forward to reading that Alien 1. I was excited in when Marvel picked up or DC picked up that intellectual property. It's going to be very interesting to see what it is that Marvel does with Alien. They've had it before. They let it go. Now it's back, and it's going to be interesting to actually see what happens with that. So let me scroll through a few more comments here. The Tiger picked up Cable, Excalibur, Bitterroot, and Shadow Doctor. I have not heard of Shadow Doctor. DC Comics says I picked up DC stuff. Shocker. I'm honestly shocked by that DC dude that you picked up DC Comics. Well done, brother. Well done. Tough Book, welcome to the live stream. Stray Dogs. Stray Dogs was fun. Grabbing all the covers. Looking forward to reading Shadow Doctor 1 and 2. Love Berserker Foil Edition and the surprise. That's what's up. That is what's up. If you guys haven't read, and I don't know if I did a video on this, Scumbag. If you guys have not read Scumbag, treat yourself. Oh, I did talk about it. Scumbag is incredible. It is incredible. If you watch the show Shameless, the guy that stars in that, what was it, William H. Macy? He is like Scumbag all the way. I'd love to see that be made into a movie. What is this? Lunar exclusive for Harley #1 was off the hook, says Jesse. I didn't know Lunar was doing exclusives. Well done. Well done. So scrolling through, 2021 says Alien 1, ASM 62, Batman Black and White, Carnage, Ha Ha, which I've never read, Scream 1, Harley Quinn 1, Miles Morales. Brother, you want to tear there. Teen Titans Academy. Part of the question is Teen Titans Academy going to be as popular as the Strange Academy? That is what's going to be interesting. A-Chan is putting it down. Picked up 7 copies of the Gleason cover of Carnage, Blood and White. That seems to be a man or woman, I'm not quite sure, that believes that we are looking at the next ASM 55. So that will be interesting to see how this plays out. Yes, indeed it is, Steve. I'm telling you, I heard about Scumbag. I was like, I don't want to read that. And then I read that and I was like, this is the bomb. I'm mad that I did not start reading it from the beginning. Scumbag is definitely incredible. So scrolling through, I think Year Zero and Scumbag were great. Couple of good cover buys. Cannot disagree with that. Year Zero. This is, I think Year Zero is from AWA. AWA put out The Resistance. The Resistance was incredible. Year 1 was pretty solid. Is Scumbag from AWA? I can't remember who the publisher is from that. Whoever it is incredibly well done. The writing, the drawing, I think are pretty well done. And it is definitely some adult type of humor in that one. Tough Book says he picked up ASM 238, a CGC 9.8 Canadian price variant. And also a Mark, you're doing some big stuff over there. Mark Jewelers, ASM 299, 8.5. Well done. Well done. That Gleason cover, Carnage cover was sold out before my LCS. Wow. Wow. That's maybe we will actually see that book pop up on the top 10 submitted list here at some point down the line. It'd be very interesting to see how quickly, if that one pops up on the list the same way that ASM 55 did, because that book was no joke, and it seems to be hanging in the top ranking pretty darn well. So who was that? Odin picked up the blank Alien 1 cover. Black covers are no problem, I'm sure. Scrolling through. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, brother. Because again, some of the names and the publishers, that stuff gets all jumbled up there. And, sometimes you're doing a video and you're literally looking at the book and you actually say like the wrong words. I mean, that is super strange, but it does indeed happen occasionally to yours truly. All right, so I want to keep this thing moving on. My guest has arrived in the green room there. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I want to spend some time talking a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted the world of comic book collecting. And as I indicated, it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. There is some good and there is some bad. Again, as it relates to comic book collecting, not looking at anything really outside of that framework, just to kind of orient everyone. And it goes without a doubt that COVID-19 has disrupted and changed a lot. You know, it's changed our daily lives. It's changed how we do business. But again, there have been, if you will, some positives. And so I wanted to invite my next guest on to spend a little bit of time to talk about a blog post that he wrote for RegieCollects.com. And I had a few people send me messages today telling me they could not find the post, I think because people wanted to read it because of the title. So I had to guide people to it. And it's actually on the homepage. If you scroll down about halfway down, more towards the bottom, you will find all of the blog posts. You click on it and you go right to the blog post. But the author of that blog post is actually joining me right now. My man, Doug. How you doing, brother? It is good to see you.
Hey, Reggie. Great to see you.
I need to take the banner off of your head so that we can see you clearly. Thank you, brother, for agreeing to come on the show again. This is like what? This is the second week, probably the fourth appearance, something like that.
Yep. And always have a lot of fun. So I appreciate you having me on.
Hopefully that does not change today. Let's just put it that way, because you just never know. It could just go left at some point unexpectedly, you know?
Fingers crossed.
So I spent some time reading this blog post. And as I did, I had several different epiphanies that kind of went through my mind. And I want to spend some time talking about like my observations as well as the observations that you made. But thinking back to when this thing all went down, right? There were some dramatic things that happened as a result of the pandemic to the comic book industry. Most notably was the shutdown of the comic book industry when Diamond stopped shipping. And in many cases, local comic shops were forced to close their doors as well. I mean, that was pretty interesting. But, you know, in your blog post, you highlight that in the wake of the shutdown, we actually started to see a shift in the business model of LCSs in many respects. Can you talk to us a little bit about the shift that you observed as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, there's always savvier businesses and less savvy. So those that were more savvy, I think, pivoted quickly to online sales. They had to. And some were already prepared, already have websites to sell their comics on, or eBay stores. I do think there's also a lot of move to selling comics through, you know, YouTube sales and Instagram and taking advantage of social media. Mm-hmm. And that's being done by LCS owners and just, you know, collectors and exactly, you know, people in the hobby. But it was interesting to me. I visit a lot of different LCSs and talk to different owners, and you could kind of tell who adjusted. Mm-hmm. And because of those adjustments, we're thriving and doing okay. And maybe those who weren't able to do that for, you know, a variety of reasons because of the pandemic, and maybe because of their own, you know, finances or position at the time. You know, so it impacted different stores differently, but there were some that were able to adapt and grow because of that.
You know, my general feeling is that a lot of LCSs, like a lot of brick and mortar stores, period, are really dependent upon their foot traffic. Right. They're dependent upon those people in the immediate and local vicinity coming by, right, on Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever it comes in. You know, they get their books, they get ready, they put them on the shelf. People come in, people buy them, people go away, and your traffic dies down until the next week. And you do. So they had that rhythm, right? They seem to be set up for that. But to your point, there is always a spectrum in every single industry. There is a spectrum of those that are less savvy and those that are more savvy. And I think that you're right, that there are some people all along that spectrum that, yes, they depended upon the foot traffic, but they also supplemented with some other things. Do you think that, because we lost a lot of LCSs, right? There were a lot of LCSs that closed their doors, never to have those doors be reopened again. And that's always a shame, but that is also something that is also part of business, right? There in some years, there are more businesses that go out of business than there are new businesses that are started, depending upon the year, right? So this is like the state of life. But do you believe that LCSs that have survived, whether they made the pivot rapidly or not to online sales and others, are they in a better position now as a result of the pandemic, or do you think that there is still a little bit of jeopardy for them?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think there are certain factors that are definitely better for them. The fact that prices across the board are up, that's going to help. Even if your sales volume is down, you're making more money off of what you're selling. So that's a real plus. There's definitely increased demand. I think there's a lot of new blood in the hobby and returning people like myself who didn't collect for many years coming back to the hobby. So that's good for business. The reality is if other shops close down, you're going to gain some customers. So that's an opportunity. Hopefully this created an opportunity to become more savvy with using social media and online sales. So I think that's a plus. So I think those are all the pluses. But I do think there are potential negatives. There's still susceptibility to a potential correction, which we talked about last week. Everybody should watch that.
If you haven't watched that video from last week, go back and watch it, because there's some good stuff there, but keep going. There's potential for a correction to occur, not a crash, but potentially a correction. Go ahead.
Yep. And I think there's also a lot of rising competition in the online sales space. You know, a lot of individual collectors, collectives of collectors that get together and do either claim sales on YouTube or Instagram. So that's not that didn't exist before, but I think that's grown a lot as hobbyists have become more savvy. So I don't think it's all one or the other, but there's both. There's definitely good, but there's still definitely some risk there.
And I think it's, for me, it's the thing of diversification, right? I think that a lot of shops, the industry in many ways learned back in the day that you potentially cannot just survive on comics alone, right? And that's why I think shops develop back issue bins. And I think that that's why a lot of them move towards toys and other types of collectibles. That's why they set up the gaming tables for the Pokemon stuff and the Magic the Gathering, right? I think that they learned from previous mistakes that diversification was important, but they did fall into a lull, because that happens of depending upon the foot traffic. The pandemic helped them to see that foot traffic can go away. And I think that foot traffic is still at risk in some ways, right? But what they've done is they've also kind of diversified themselves in other ways by having curbside pickup, by having claim sales, by selling through social media, by having their own websites if they did not have that before. So that isn't to say that they won't fall prey to something else a little bit later, but at least I think that they're a little more diversified and maybe a little more prepared than they were before, And it's like, every time one of these things happens that affects the industry, I think that people get a little savvier, a little smarter, and maybe a little less susceptible to some of the shifting whims of things. Would you agree with that, or would you modify something in the last few seconds that I've said?
No, I totally agree with that. And, one other, maybe a little less obvious factor in all of this, and this is somewhat related to the pandemic, and I think somewhat just kind of a cyclical thing that happens. But I also think the rise of independent books doing so well right now is a plus for LCS, because many of the independents will allow for return books, which the big boys don't. So, and DC obviously took a hit. But I don't think that's the only reason. I think some of these independents, like, Boom as an example, are just crushing it right now. And as those independent books take a bigger market share, I think they're a little bit friendlier in many ways to LCS. And I think that helps.
I don't know if I would disagree with that. I mean, I've heard challenges sporadically and anecdotally from shop owners, but I think generally I would get on board with that, and my question to you is, this isn't the first time that we've seen this, this renaissance, if you will, of indies, right? I show obscure books all the time on my channel from publishers that we have never heard of before, that have come and gone and sometimes come back again and gone away again. Do you think that what we are seeing right now with the indies is here to stay, or do you think that we're going to see that ebb and flow that we've maybe seen in the past?
I think there's always ebb and flow. It does feel like 2020 and 2021, it is so unique from a creative standpoint, from a growth in the industry standpoint, from what we've experienced, from how social media has blown up in its role, channels like yours. I feel like you never can really tell an era of comics until you look in hindsight. But I would, circle this past year on your calendar. When we eventually break up the modern era that people have been calling it for 30 years.
For 40 years, 30 years.
I think there's sub eras. I think this year will mark a changing of the guard in eras someday when it's recognized down the road.
And I will tell you, I personally feel that it is different. I think that the talent, the creative energy, the business savvy, the fact that these companies are using all of the tools at their disposal and not necessarily just gimmicks per se, like shiny foil, right? Yeah, it had shiny foil, but it was also a good book attached to a celebrity now coming out in a movie and some other things. Like they are deploying all of their resources towards making some magic happen, and it's really interesting to see.
And they're tapping into the streaming and movies.
Yes,
they're making those deals, and some of them are probably positioning themselves in the market specifically to do that, which I think will help them.
There is not an accident that Boom Studios is located in Los Angeles.
Nope.
There is not an accident that they have relationships already for movies and also TV shows. It's not an accident that they wrote a book with Keanu Reeves. like
Definitely not.
Brother, I mean, I said it before. I was like, this has all the makings of a movie that it's about to happen, right? Ross Regie, who has been on the show, I messaged Ross the other day. I was like, hey, is this foil thing with the free book for Something Is Killing the Children, this real? He messaged me back and he was like, yep. And it's like the guy taps into social media. He's on social media like nobody's business. So they're doing all of the right things. And again, that's why I feel like this is a little bit different. At least I hope that it's going to be different, because they are also putting out some incredible content. In your post, one of the things that you spoke about, and you also spoke about it here just now, is the diversification of where things are being sold. And it's not just on eBay anymore. It is not just in these big marketplaces. It's on apps. It's on Instagram, which I recommend. I've done like 3 videos on that alone, right? And as I read your blog post, one of the things that hit me is that we might now be blind to a significant portion of sales that are taking place. And what I mean by that is we don't have anything that grabs content from apps like Instagram. We don't have anything that grabs it from Macari or OfferUp or Let Go, all apps that I've created videos on before. We don't have anything that captures the book that I sold to Matt Woods that I forgot about, that Matt Woods reminded me about. And I was like, oh, I sold that to you? Okay, congrats. You know, there is a segment because of the LCS owners trying to survive. There is all these people that are in the industry that are hobbyists that are like, hey, I can make some money doing this. We're missing things out. What are your thoughts on the missing data related to sales? What are your thoughts on that? And then what might be the potential impact of that on things?
So you're right. There's definitely a data gap right now. And I don't think that's unusual. Most data have gaps. You know, those of us who are data nerds like complete data. But that's why we have representative samples. You know, we can get pretty close to predictive data or accurate data with a margin of error. But to your point, I think there's an opportunity here because you're right that we're not getting that. Mm-hmm. But most, not all, but a lot of that data is publicly available. You know, it's either posted on Instagram or you could watch a claim sale and actually track sales prices. You know, always from individual seller to individual seller. That data has never been available. Just like, you know, a lot of Comic-Con sales or small comic shows
or
data.
Little trade deals that you hear about at people's homes or sale. Exactly. Like, you don't hear about that stuff. Go ahead, I cut you off though.
No, just there's always been some level of that missing data, but I do think that pool is growing. So I do think there's an opportunity for some savvy pricing service like Go Collect to say, okay, how can we gather some of that, or you know, maybe 1% of that data, and what can we learn from that? Is it different from what we're getting? And if so, then we need to adjust because we'll have a more accurate price guide than everybody else out.
As a result of factoring in that data that everybody's missing at some point. I mean, technically, we may just have created our own business plan. Me and you, brother. We're gonna watch every claim sale, capture everything, and we're gonna sell the data to somebody else. Like, I don't know how much free time you have, but I'm ready.
Or maybe offer an incentive for those claim sales to report the data to them. You know, let it come to you. So we'll work on the business plan. We got something.
Brother, you know, it's one of those things I'm always trying to think ahead, in your blog post, you also highlighted a couple of factors that may be a benefit but also have a downside. And what I'm talking about, and you already alluded to it, are new collectors coming into the hobby and also seasoned collectors, people that have let's just put it that have returned to the hobby. I'm trying to find a way not to say old because it's not about age, but it's about people that have been away and have returned of any age, right? So new collectors that are fresh into the hobby and then newly returning collectors. In my estimation, there has been a surge in those things as a result of the pandemic. People are at home, they're watching the movies, they're watching the streaming shows, they're getting excited. They're like, well, what is this comic stuff, right? They're looking into it. Other people are like, I remember that as a kid. I haven't touched my books in 25 years. I think I might have that book. Let me go find that book. I have seen it, but it's all anecdotal at this point. And it's anecdotal because of my videos. I get these messages like every day. I haven't touched a comic in 25 years. I just came back into the hobby and found your channel, and now I've been watching it nonstop. These are the messages that I get to people. But as a result of this influx of people, we also potentially get people that don't fully appreciate the actual value of a book and might overpay because they're bringing their money and they're also driving the prices up. So it's a good and the bad thing. Talk with us a little bit about maybe what you referenced in the blog post and how you see the newly returning collectors impacting the hobby.
So I think that any influx of people is good because that's going to bring money. You know, there's risk for those individuals not understanding the value. But I did hear someone, I'm not sure who, so I apologize for not attributing it, but I did hear someone say new money always values things differently anyway. And I think that's interesting because it brings a new perspective to the hobby. You know, someone coming in might look at a book that someone who's seen the FMV of a certain comic or character, you know, flat forever and say, whoa, no, that's worth way more. So I'm willing to pay more. And that's why FMV changes. So I do think there's risk. You don't want people getting burned or catching a brick too often because then they leave. So you know, the role that you play in this hobby and others like you of helping to educate, that was something that was not available just a few years ago. But now you can hop on YouTube and do a quick search and find all these great how-to videos on Regie Collects, and it helps you avoid those things. So I do think the other risk as new money comes in is, you know, sometimes we loosen our belt a little too much, you know, like, okay, great, the money's flowing. It's always going to be like this. And it's not. As we've talked about, all these things are cyclical. So I do think from the business side, if you're on the, you know, on the sales side of this and you're benefiting from the influx of cash, you do need to understand that it might not always be like this. And so what do I need to do to protect myself so that I'm stashing some of this away for a rainy day and not getting slaughtered if, you know, 10, 20% of the money leaves in a year or so?
Well said. And so for those that are coming in a little bit late, I'm sitting down chatting with Doug about the impact of the pandemic on comic book collecting. And we're just kind of meandering through a blog post that is available on regiecollects.com. So just wanted to kind of update people for that. And what he was also alluding to a second ago is the new mission statement, the mission statement of helping you make sense of comic book collecting. That is the goal, right? Is to help people that are coming into the hobby, that are newly returning to the hobby, not catch a brick. And by catching a brick, that means like making a mistake that is like detrimental, where people want to quit the hobby, right? A bad deal is another word for a brick. And I get a lot of messages from people that are like, so what is a brick? I'm like, so here, I'm going to have a brick and I'm going to throw it at you. Is that good or bad? Like inherently, you know that that's probably not a good thing, right? So, but I think that you're spot on. Again, there are both good and bad things about this influx. And I think that people that are in the hobby and coming back into the hobby need to take steps to protect themselves, because to the conversation that we had before, there is the possibility that a correction will happen. I remember at the start of the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion around, because of the shutdown that we already talked about of the industry, because LCS is closed, the industry is going to crash. There was a ton of that talk. And I was there. I was like, man, I could see this going bad as a result, right? If the stimulus money doesn't come out and people are losing their jobs and they don't have money, that means that they don't have discretionary income to spend on stuff like comics. So rightly so, we predicted that there could be a correction, right? That didn't happen. Didn't happen, right? Fast forward, people are now saying at the end of the pandemic, there will be a crash when people have their discretionary income and they can go back to work and they can go to Starbucks and they can go on vacation. There will be a crash, right? One of the questions that I have is, so how does the pandemic end? The same way that there is no clear definition for a comic book crash, I don't know that there is a clear definition for when the pandemic is over. And I say that because states have opened and closed. Vaccinations are going on, but then the variants are also coming. So when and how does the pandemic end so as to create this crash that people are expecting when discretionary income suddenly just goes everywhere? Thoughts?
It isn't clear cut, and it's gonna happen gradually over time. And I think when I think of, okay, in terms of comic collecting, the pandemic ending, obviously in the real world, it's when, we're mostly safe. We can mostly, function in life the way we used to, without risk to ourselves or our loved ones. So that's a totally different thing. I think from a comic collecting standpoint, it's like at that moment when we can do most of the things we used to and spend our money most of the way we used to. For me, it's different for everybody, but I like to go to concerts. I like to go to comedy clubs. I like to go out to dinner. I go on vacations with my family. All of those things I haven't been doing. And I know some states have allowed some of those things to some level. So again, it's not always, even across the board, but at some point, whether it's 6 months from now or 3 years from now, hopefully 6 months from now, closer to that end of the spectrum, most of us will be able to do most things that we were able to back then. Money will shift at that point. That doesn't mean a crash. And, we talked last week, it could mean a correction. But with continued interest in the hobby, new growth, the drivers out there, and quite frankly, investment dollars, if that all keeps coming in, that can kind of counterbalance those of us like me who will spend definitely a little bit less money, on comics when I live by budget. I'm fiscally, a strict guy with that. So my habits will change. But there doesn't mean somebody else won't replace that dollar that I spend somewhere else in the hobby.
There is a method to the questions that I've been asking because, using Climbing Comics, Alan's comment from last week, there might be a catch. There might be a quick catch for that decline in some people spending because others have been attracted to the hobby that are now having some fun. They're spending their money. They're catching your decline in spending, and maybe things will continue. Maybe people will realize, to your point, that this won't go on forever, and maybe they slowly start to take down their spending, which again doesn't create this precipitous drop and fall off. It's more of a gradual thing, a gradual correction, as we've talked about before. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I think I forgot to mention last week, and you kind of alluded to it in this conversation, is that you actually cannot see a crash. The economists have basically said that a crash can only be seen in hindsight. So everyone that's going around saying a crash is coming, you're just saying that. You technically cannot predict a crash. It is like impossible, and it's been said by people way smarter than I. So I'm just like repeating what I heard. I'm not coming from a background of being able to really be able to speak to some of that stuff. So one of the things that was funny is that based upon the conversation that we had last week, I received a message from a card guy. And this card guy basically jumped on the landmine. And he said, absolutely, card guys are coming into comics. And what we're doing is we're looking at your census data, and we're like 3,000 copies of, or 4,000 copies of Ultimate Fallout 4. That is nothing. Let me just scoop that up for whatever price. And it's like he was literally saying the opposite of what I believed, was that there wasn't this huge influx. And he's basically saying, no, there's a lot of us coming over because we're looking at our census numbers, and there's a ton of this rookie card across all the publishers or issuers. Yeah. Whereas with you guys, it's only 4,000. That's a tiny number. What are your thoughts on that? Because I have a newfound appreciation for like his point of view. But what are your thoughts on this?
So when I was a kid, I collected baseball cards and comic books. So I still follow that market a little bit too. Not the way I do comics. I'm not spending money there. But that's on point. Like for example, Topps, which is the largest producer, it is not totally uncommon for a popular base card of a rookie to have 17,000, 20,000 PSA 10s on the census.
Wow.
So you're talking, and I think a PSA 10 is harder to get than a 9.8. It just shows the difference in quantity being produced. You know, if there's 20 million of every card being produced, there might be, you know, 50 to or 40 to 100,000 of a comic. So that census data is real. Like when the top grade in one industry is equivalent to an entire print run of an issue in our industry,
Right.
it looks good.
Right. And I mean, I did not fully appreciate that. You know, my other thing is that I did not want to lay blame on a group of people to say it's their fault. But he was like, yeah, sign this up. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. If you want me to say it, I'll say it. No, but it was just very interesting to kind of hear his rationale for why he believed that his folks are kind of flowing over, was that they're looking at the census data, they're looking at the values, and they're like, this makes complete sense from my world, from my viewpoint. Whereas we might be looking at that and we're like 4,000 copies of Ultimate Fallout at 9.8 or whatever it is. That just doesn't seem quite right. You know, that for us, that doesn't seem right. But to your point, these are the numbers that we have adjusted to, the values, the quantity on the census versus an outsider, right?
Yeah.
So just, you know, it's one of those things where I try not to be so strict in my beliefs that I cannot be receptive to other people's points of view, because I don't know everything. And he just unloaded on me. I think I was like in a meeting at the time, so I couldn't fully appreciate it, but he was unloading and I was like, wow, there is something here, something to consider, you know? So in the end, and we've kind of already touched on this, but like what do you see? How do you see this unfolding? Right. Is it what we talked about, which is this you anticipate this gradual leveling off of things? And if that happens, cool. But what comes along with that, do you see this mass exodus of people all of a sudden leaving the hobby? Or is it more just a gradual decline of things over time, not back to zero, but to maybe, to use the old term, back to a new normal of some sort? What are your thoughts on that?
I think there will be a gradual decline, but the interest and attention is there. So
hold on one second, Doug.
Yeah.
Right there. Sports cars guy. Right there.
Yeah. They're out there.
I had to jump on it. I saw it and I was like, you know what? Let me just throw this up on screen. I'm sorry. Now I'm paying attention. That's
okay. And they're smart. If I was in the card market right now, I wouldn't spend another dime in it. I'd be selling there and buying here. So, but totally lost my train of thought. What were we? What will happen? Okay.
What if you had the crystal ball? Like, what do you think that the future actually looks like for this?
Yeah, I think there will be some, correction and decline. I don't think it will necessarily be dramatic at all. I think it'll have ebb and flows, and I don't think it'll affect all books equally. I think there are books that are here to stay that are just going to keep growing. I think keys in every era will continue. They'll have their little ups and downs, but they're going up. I was talking with a friend in the community, Aaron from AA Comics, about Ultimate Fallout 4. And I said, it's at a really high point now. It might drop some, but that book is going to be the book from this era. So 10, 20 years from now, absolutely, that book is going to be more than it is now, even though it seems like it's high right now, because everything's going to, or the highest valued things from different eras, I think will keep their value and continue to grow.
I think that's a good way to look at it. Now I need to rethink the email that I receive from my private seller that I do deals with often, because he actually offered me 2 copies of Ultimate Fallout. He was like, the price is this, but your price is this. And I was like, that's still a lot.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know if I need to stockpile them like that. So I need to rethink it. There's so many other things that I could do, like save my money, so I need to think about it. But Doug, as always, man, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for just the wonderful conversation, just the thoughtfulness of your responses. I always appreciate. And I think people do as well. A lot of people sent me messages. Doug did a good job. Doug represented himself well. I like what Doug said. Ditto, right? I mean, those are like the responses. So I appreciate you this week and last week. Same with Alan, just solid people. So thank you for that. Where can people find you if they want to check you out on the social medias? Where can they find you?
Best place to get me is Instagram, Doug.Bratton, BRATTON.9. And they can read my blog post every week on RegieCollects.com.
There we go. So, Doug, again, thank you, brother. I definitely appreciate you coming on and joining me. We'll have to have you back again, possibly next week. If you just never know, you just never know.
Let me know, Reggie.
Thank you, brother. Be well. Bye.
You too.
Love that guy. All right. So I am going to keep this thing moving forward. I need to check my message. Okay. All right. So I actually do need to wrap this up. My wife is sending me messages from the other room. We have a workman here that is trying to do some work on the house. So we're going to wrap this up. Again, I want to thank Doug for coming on, hanging out with me just a little bit. I always enjoy having conversations with other members of the comic book community that have a point of view. Whether I agree with it or not, I still enjoy hearing from people. So if you guys need to reach out to me, feel free to do so, because I'm always up to have a conversation. And you can do it on Instagram at Regie Collects. And stay tuned, because there is still one more day of content that is going to be coming out from the channel. And unfortunately, I don't have this week's book sitting next to me, so I cannot show it. But for watching the videos that come out from this week, there is a really cool book that you can actually win. This is last week's book that still has yet to be claimed. And so the winner from Sunday's show needs to claim this book by next Sunday, or it will go to the second place on the list. But like I said, if you guys need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.